Well, the Fed is not going to respond to trade. It is going to respond to the health of the economy. And I really don't see the Fed deviating from its plan to basically raise rates 3 times a year and continue to run off the balance sheet. You know, the economy would have to get really, really bad for the Fed to change from that. And unless something cataclysmic happens on the trade front, I don't think that's very likely. The size of the tariffs really are not that big relative to the size of the economy.
I believe it was the Wall Street Journal this morning had an article where it raised the specter that wage growth is getting a little too fast for comfort and may start to nibble into corporate margins. Do you see that as a real threat to corporate profit growth?
Oh, it's a threat to corporate profit growth because, you know, capitalists got the lion's share of the economy, or economic growth now, at least for the last 10 years.
Capital won, labor
personally,
lost, or didn't win.
Capital won, labor lost, and, you know, personally, I think turnabout is fair play. And I think it's time for labor to gain. I think that's really important for our economy. It's important for us sociologically. So I'm rooting for labor to get a bigger share of the pie.
Does it imply anything about the level of stock prices?
Well, it depends on multiples. Where I think is going to happen to profits is I think that profits are roughly going to stagnate. It's not like they're going to plummet, but they're not going to grow as they have. And so it really depends on what you expect to happen to the multiple.
And as we look at what just happened last night, we got President Trump's nomination for the new Supreme Court Justice, Mr. Brett Kavanaugh. What do you think he means for business? I've heard some folks say, yes, he's very pro-business, and others say, well, not as much.
Well, I used to work with him, and so I'll just give you a personal impression. First of all, I worked with him back in the in 01 and 02, and first of all, I have to say he's a really, really nice guy. He's a great guy, personality-wise, and I think that that's going to help him go through what's about to be confirmation hell. It's going to be an asset for him. Second of all, I mean, obviously everyone acknowledges he's very, very smart, but also, you know, he's really not a wingnut. He's a very solid guy, and so I think the extremist label really doesn't work in his case. As far as the effect on business, you know, he is what he says he's going to do. He's a great believer in the Constitution, and he believes that judges should interpret. Net, I think that is a pro-business position because, you know, the Constitution and not having judges meddle, I think on net is a pro-business position.
He also believes, at least in 2009, that he had written a paper, I believe, that he doesn't think the president should have to deal with things like lawsuits and criminal investigations. You think that's going to be important coming down the road here?
We'll see. You know, the separation of powers is something I don't pretend to be an expert on. That's why we have courts and judges to make those decisions. That's why we have the Supreme Court, is to adjudicate between the Congress and the executive. So I'm just going to steer clear of that.
You know, when it comes to the Trump presidency, Larry, we've got a bunch of push and pulls when it comes to the economy. We were just talking about Kavanaugh, and he seems to be pro-business, as you had mentioned, rolling back on the side of rolling back regulation or keeping agencies' power in check. So that goes right into the category of President Trump and his deregulatory stance, which has been good for business. We got the tax cuts, but now we have the tariffs. So when you take a look at the whole, you know, administration and what they've been doing so far, what is the net effect on growth, do you think? Are we still on the plus side of things?
The net effect is, obviously. I mean, growth has accelerated dramatically. Employment to population ratios have accelerated dramatically. Certainly, both the deregulation and also the tax cuts were very big positives. So far, the size of the tariffs has been very, very small. I do think it is a worry that things could escalate, and I think that's a concern. I really don't think that's a likely thing to happen. It's a possibility, because in the end, I think it's in both Trump's interest and Xi's interests to find a way out of this. So I think, you start with a baby step, and I think there's likely to be at least a ceasefire coming pretty soon. If we're not going to ever resolve every issue with China, but I do think we may see people back off pretty soon. I think that's what the market's believing.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.